The Magius were the main antagonists of the first story arc of Magia Record, ranging all the way from chapter 1 through chapter 10, but now that the dust has settled, what actually was their big plan, were they justified in what they did, and what do they have to do with Kyubey? First, let's understand that how and why Magius even formed and what their initial goals were. It all started with Toka, Nemu and Oi being deathly ill in a hospital in Kamihama until Oi was miraculously healed of her sickness by Iroha's wish. A short time later, a witch attacked the hospital and Iroha was forced to defend the trio of girls from a witch. Having witnessed this, Toka decides to talk to Kyubey to gather even more information on magical girls, since Toka already has a fair bit of knowledge from her uncle's book, which he wrote about magical girls. Toka tells all this information to Nemu and Oi too, and Toka suggests the three of them enact a grand plan together in order to help not just Iroha, but every magical girl in the world. The basic idea behind the grand plan is to substitute the functions of Kyubey with their own magic, so that they can take direct control of the fate of magical girls. First, Oi wishes for the power to harvest despair, or impurities, from all magical girls. Next up, Toka wishes for the power to convert harvested impurities into pure energy. And lastly, Nemu wishes for the power to manifest pure energy into physical form. Together they create a pipeline that automatically takes in impurities from magical girls, converts them into energy, and releases them as physical manifestations that would also help cool down the universe and fight entropy as Kyubey wanted to himself, while keeping magical girls alive and keeping them from witching. All that the trio needed to make sure that this plan was a reality is having enough karmic burden to bear the weight of those wishes. Oi immediately gets overwhelmed by the impurities she is taking in and is threatening to witch out almost immediately. Toka and Nemu are unable to help Oi, but Alina comes to the rescue and creates a force field around the hospital to stop more impurities from streaming in. Alina had also been to the same hospital when some time before this Alina had attempted suicide. Even so, their efforts are not enough and Nemu formulates a solution. In order to stop Ui from becoming a witch, she would lock her soul away, and as the prison for Ui's soul, Nemu designates the empty shell of Kyubey that had been left over after the three had made their wish. Now, we don't know exactly how any of this was possible or why it led to the world forgetting Ui with this action, but I guess it seems like Nemu's magic basically banished Ui out of existence and left only part of her spirit behind in Mokyu, so that one day she might return. With everyone forgetting Ui at this point, the memories of the characters present at the scene were also rewritten. The three of them now believed that Alina had saved Toka and Nemu from a witch, and that Alina somehow found the half-witch Shitori Egumo, which they christened Embryo Eve, in the hospital lobby. Alina believed she had captured that witch in one of her labyrinths to transport it around, while Toka and Nemu believed that they had made their wishes in order to enact their grand plan with the help of Eve, who was passively gathering impurities from all over Kamihama. The new grand plan was now the following. Aina enlarged the force field, that she forgot she had put up for Ui's sake, to span all of Kamihama, which would keep Kyubey out and limit the effectiveness of Eve to only Kamihama. And with Eve stowed away in one of Aina's pocket labyrinths, the three would then set out to find a permanent residence where they could start working on the next step of their plan. In order to make Eve able to gather impurities from the entire world without immediately collapsing into itself, they would feed energy to Eve to make it more powerful until it was powerful enough to hatch into a perfect being that could handle the impurities from all magical girls all over the world. In order to do this, they needed allies. Their search for allies would become easier than expected, however, since at this point in time, due to the influence of Eve, magical girls across Kamihama now suddenly manifested doppels instead of witches when their soul gems overflowed with impurities. Using this to their advantage, Toka was able to recruit Mifuyu as their first ally, who in turn was able to recruit the Amane sisters. To recruit even more allies, they followed a two-pronged approach. Mifuyu would use her reputation as a lesbian as a veteran to recruit masked girls in the east of Kamihama, while the Magius would send radio waves across the entire region to influence magical girls from the surrounding areas to come to Kamihama as well. It is within these radio waves that somehow visions of Oi have been mixed in for Homura to see. Meanwhile, Nemu would create rumors to gather energy from people in Kamihama to hatch Eve, and one of their first rumors was the faint Hope Hotel itself. For a while, this plan did work well until Magius learned that Yachio had started investigating rumors as well. Mifu initially asked Nemu to create a rumor specifically to lock Yachio away until the Magius has completed their goals. And good job, Mifu, you're playing on the emotional state of your ex-girlfriend, you evil person. But Yachio was able to defeat the rumor together with Iroha. Toka becomes furious at this and grows restless, with the rest of the Magius getting angry too, and some ideas are thrown around what to do next. Aina proposes to employ the controlled use of witches to cause more magical girls to unleash their doppels, making them easier targets for recruitment, but Mifu states the truth behind magical girls turning into witches is too delicate a subject to use for their own goals like that. Toka, however, takes this idea and runs way far away with it, arguing they should create a terrifying rumor that would cause a mass-scale doppling and even cause PTSD in people. Mifu is outraged that Toka would even consider something like this and forbids her from going through with this until Toka slaps Mifuyu. It is imperative at this point to note that both Nemu and Mifuyu disagreed with Toka, while Aina evaded the question of morality completely, so keep this dynamic in mind. Nemu and Toka at this point have a one-on-one, and Toka is antagonizing Mifuyu, which Nemu somewhat agrees with, but also notes that Mifuyu has the moral high ground and notes that Toka should stick to good morals too, since the feathers depend on the Magius too. A day later, Toka decides not to delay anymore and directly goes against Mifuyu. She tweaks the radio waves to attract even more witches and decides to use even more dangerous rumors to further their goals. Mifuyu at this point is unable to stop Toka. Well, at this point, all of this paints the picture of Toka growing frustrated and angry with the problems they are having and overcompensating by jumping to the most drastic measures. It should also be noted that while all of this is going on, the Wings of Magius were indeed hunting witches together, even receiving help from Mifuyu, from Aina, from Nemu herself, meaning that for the feathers, Magius still looked like a reasonable and credible organization that allowed them to both live their lives as magical girls together with a stable and safe team, while also looking towards the long-term goal of salvation. But the Wings of Magius themselves are going to get their own video, so I will leave it at that for now and just move on. From this point onward, the rest of the story is told to us through the individual chapters of the main story. We know Aina was granted permission by Toka to breed witches, and we know that Toka and Nemu convinced Mifuyu to help with creating the Memory Museum rumor that they then used to brainwash even more magical girls into their service, and somewhere along these lines, Nemu also let go of the pretense of having good morals at all and fell more closely in line with Toka's ideals. This is ultimately what culminated in the Chelation Land incident, where both Toka and Nemu, with Aina's gleeful approval, tried to commit mass murder using a brainwashed Tsuruno. At this point, the three Magius were no longer able to change their course and were locked into the evil personas that we see in the main story. Finally, the Magius come up with a plan to reach their goal the fastest way possible by summoning Walpurgisnacht directly and having Eve absorb it. To this end, they even got ready to sacrifice all magical girls of Kamehama and even their own feathers. At the climax of the confrontation, Hotel Fainthope itself gets destroyed, Eve breaks free, while Purgisnacht arrives at the city, requiring the combined help of all of the most powerful magical girls in the entire city and Konomi to defeat both Eve and Walpurgisnacht, while rescuing Ui and restoring Toka's and Nemu's memories. We don't get to see, sadly, what Aina has to say about their actions after having regained her old memories, because right at that moment Aina immediately gets mind-controlled by the Uwasa of the Fur God and yeeted away. This is where the Magius organization ends, with Aina missing in action and Toka and Nemu having regained their memories of Ui. Although, as the Sakura event showed, still very much bratty kids that want to control and cheat the system they are in to get only their own wills fulfilled, even if it costs the life of their allies and not trusting anyone else. So a rehabilitation of Toka and Nemu seems unlikely at this point. I know some people might have pointed out that it was having lost the memories of Ui that made Toka and Nemu evil, but in the Sakura event they basically acted the same way they did as the Magius, just with a different goal in mind. Now, what does all of this have to do with this little guy though, and what is a strawman? So in short, a strawman is a very simple and basic misrepresentation of a more complex argument, designed to make it really easy to attack the original argument even though what you're attacking is not the original argument, but your own faulty misrepresentation of it. And in case you haven't gathered it from the title yet, I am saying that the Magius are in a certain way a strawman for Kyubey. Now this is not meant as either a defense or an attack on Kyubey or the Magius. Actually, I don't really care that much about Kyubey. He's like one of the least important plot points in all of Madoka Magica, but the reason why this is so important is because by comparing Magius to Kyubey, we're going to get a very deep insight into what makes the Magius tick. In order to make this easier to follow, I've written down some stuff about Kyubey's ideals and his goals. First off, Kyubey is hyper-intelligent and uses cold logic to make his decisions. He also uses that logic to make sure that he can devise a plan on how to create a new system that is able to fulfill his goal for him. Also, his goals make sense completely from a utilitarian standpoint, but they do create some suffering in order to make his goals work. He also uses his high intellect to well, basically talk down to people, which makes him come across very arrogant to people. Also, he always says the truth, like the words that come out of his mouth are always the truth, but he just omits information, he misdirects, he dodges questions, he makes sure that even though he can't lie, he still misdirects and tricks people as much as he can. And also, even despite all of that, he still shows a reasonable respect to the people that he is using for his goals, and while he values that goal more than anything else, he still tries to be forthcoming and reasonable in the suffering that he creates and respects the people that he uses. Now the thing about the Magius is that you take a giant red pen and you like cross all of this shit out down here. They lie all the time, they pay no respect to everything, but they still are very arrogant. They still have a lot of this right here and a lot of this right here, a lot of utilitarian thinking with a lot more suffering even. They still want to create a system that basically fulfills their goal, and they believe they have intelligence and cold logic, but not really as well. It's a kind of a mishmash of random stuff, so we need to go deeper on this. Comparing Magius to Kyubey is not something that just I came up with. Both the anime and the game state this comparison completely outright, and of course the origin of Magius was all about stealing Kyubey's abilities in order to do what he does, but without causing death to people. So let's take a closer look. I first mentioned Kyubey's intelligence and how he uses cold logic in his decisions. The reason why this works so well for Kyubey is because Kyubey is presented as an alien creature who says he has no emotions, and to us this means his race, or the race that created him, is so far advanced that their intelligence and craft makes our civilization look like a collapsed sand castle built by a toddler. When you try to apply these ideas to the Magius, and I'll be talking primarily about Toka, since she's like the de facto leader of Magius and makes almost all of the decisions of the group, we of course have to immediately concede that no matter how intelligent Toka as well as Nemu appear, they are still limited by what human intellect can possibly produce, as well as of course those pesky nuisances that we call emotions. And looking back at the story of Magius, it is absolutely clear that Toka let her frustration and anger get the better of her to make decisions that both ended up terribly for the Magius as their entire organization, as well as everyone else in the city. Toka let her emotions destroy her own plans and completely forsook the pretense of hyper-intelligence and logic. That brings me directly to my next point. Because of Kyubey's cold logic, he was able to devise a plan how to create a system that would, with only minimal maintenance, solve the problem almost by itself, and is designed in such a way that the chances of his plan succeeding through that plan are near guaranteed. Neither after Madoka's universe rewrite nor Homura's universe rewrite was Kyubey's plan ever abandoned, it only changed shape. And the main reason why his plans were never completely abandoned is because his goals are so important to the universe that both Madoka and Homura understood that his ultimate goal of overcoming entropy should still come true. Looking back at the Magius, their plan at the beginning did seem foolproof, with the exception of only one weak point, being the possibility that the karmic potential of any one of them was not high enough to shoulder their tasks, which is exactly what went wrong in the first place. And the Magius were even warned of this by Kyubey right before it happened. They failed to apply proper precautions before the plan even started. From here they devised a restructured plan that hinged on rumors gathering energy from normal people, but there is a massive flaw with that plan of course, which is that it causes one-sided harm. Kyubey at least gave something back to people in return, but we will get to that a bit more later. The reason why that is so bad for the Magius is because causing one-sided harm will make anyone seeking that immediately assume they are the bad guys, they need to be stopped. We are creating enemies that could band together and attack you, even if what you are doing has a noble and important goal. The Magius did not account that creating rumors that siphon energy from people by, for example, hypnotizing people and putting them to sleep for days might be seen as unprovoked hostile actions that other magical girls in the area, maybe someone by the name of, I don't know, Yachiyo Nanami, might use as an excuse to start a crusade against the Magius and gather allies around her to help her. In fact, Yachiyo opposing them so early and them being unable to deal with interference from her was the main cause that made Magius become more evil over time and jeopardized the chances of success. If they could have just dealt with that problem, maybe everything would have turned out completely differently. Their planning was bad from the start, and it only got worse as time went on. The next big mistake was to make this problem even bigger by doubling down on outwardly hostile intentions, by causing the Memory Museum incident and the Chelation Land incident right afterwards, where they completely dropped all pretense that they might actually be the good guys by doing what has to be done, and go full-on villain mode, which created even more enemies and allowed Team Mikazuki to basically rally anyone to their side. And both of these incidents were therefore free recruitment and propaganda basically for Team Mikazuki, which only accelerated the inevitable downfall of Magius. I don't know if you know about this yet, but being outwardly evil hurts your success chances really hard in whatever you're trying to accomplish. Feigning moral ambiguity and keeping your potential enemies guessing if you're really evil or not, that causes indecision in your opponent and actually gives you an immense amount of free room to operate in. But once you drop that moral ambiguity, once you are outwardly just completely evil, there is nothing stopping your enemies from recognizing you as threats and attacking you. On to the next point though. Magius' goals are definitely correct from a utilitarian standpoint, at least it seems that way, and that viewpoint could excuse the suffering they are causing. However, the way they are going about trying to reach that important payoff is both too prone to failure and causes harm that is unnecessary. I understand arguing that if an end is important enough, it justifies all means. But what I have a problem with is asking if A, those means don't make reaching that end harder, and B, if all the means you are taking are even necessary to reach that end in the first place. As we know from what we saw in the earlier days of Magius, rumors can gather energy from people in various ways without killing them, and doppling also creates energy for Eve to take. This means that there are ways for the Magius to gather energy for Eve that at least doesn't kill people, and it's possible they could create rumors that gather energy that cause even less harm to people than, for example, the Seance Shrine rumor did. And as I talked about earlier, taking more outwardly evil choices means you are both creating enemies, which lowers the sense of the success of you reaching the end that your means are supposed to justify, but you're also causing unnecessary harm and even killing people, which are unnecessary means to that end. But what is all of that for? To reach the goal a little bit faster? I can understand the argument that magical girls are dying in great numbers every day all over the world, but that is exactly why you should take the path of highest success chance. Because if your plan fails, countless more magical girls will keep dying every day. Magius basically gambled their entire plan and significantly reduced their chances of success to save a few thousand more magical girls, when they are already poised to saving billions of magical girls if their plan succeeds. Suddenly, the entire equation doesn't look utilitarian anymore at all. Looks more like idiots at play here, trying to hide their idiocy behind false utilitarianism and faulty logic. Meanwhile, Kyubey, while he values his goals more than anything else in the world, still only targets a small fraction of humanity. He gives the people he uses something back in return, both their wish and magical powers that they get, and most importantly, he allows people to turn him down. Even Madoka he was allowing to turn him down. Of course, Kyubey misleads people. But even so, his terms are rather reasonable and forthcoming if you weigh that on the other side of the scale is literally the fate of the entire universe. Nothing stopped Kyubey from enslaving all of humanity against their will to gather the energy that he wants, and yet he didn't. But enough about Kyubey. This is about the Magius, who don't really care what anyone else thinks and love to brainwash people into their service against their will, and in return, those people are made to kill other people and potentially die in the process. Good job, Magius. People love working for you on those great terms that you're presenting. So what could the Magius have done instead? Well, since their goal is so incredibly important and they actually have proof that their plan could work, because doppels do indeed appear in Kamehama and save people's lives, why not actually have us sit down with people opposing you and explain everything to you in a reasonable manner? It almost looked like Magius was going to do something like this in chapter 6, and the story could have had a big twist where it turns out, oh, Yachio is actually in the wrong and actually helping out Magius is the right thing to do, but we already know that the story used this as a pretense to have the Magius do something incredibly evil and throw all those chances out the window. But imagine if, when they found out what Yachio was doing, she was destroying rumors, they actually had a sat down with Yachio, explained everything they are doing, and show via doppels that their plans are real and do work, show her maybe that some rumors don't hurt people, and explain to her that the faster they gather energy, the more lives they could save, and maybe, just maybe, they could immediately end the entire conflict right there by making a deal with Yachio, which would have immediately ended all of Magius Record's main story right then and there. Magius would end up actually achieving their goal without killing a single person, and hey, maybe they could still achieve their goal rather quickly if via Yachio they could actually recruit more people to help out. Maybe they could even have a sort of charity donation drive where magical girls of all of Kamehama come together to donate grief seeds directly to Eve, so that Eve can absorb the energy from grief seeds to power up faster. I mean, after all of these magical girls are having their lives perpetually saved by Eve right now, so giving some grief seeds back, which they don't particularly need anymore since they are doppling, would have been a great way of making sure that all of Kamehama, all of those magical girls can come together to reach this goal very quickly, efficiently, and more importantly with a 100% success chance. But no. Of course, the big problem in all of that lies that if that happened, the main story wouldn't happen, and we wouldn't have 10 chapters of Team Mikazuki running around spanking Magius. So that, however, is why I want to leave you with something before I get to the end of this video. Is it enough as an excuse to simply say that the writers, they wanted to make a story with a big obvious villain to fight, to have that happen, and to that end it was totally fine to make Magius full of faults? Or should they have tried a lot harder in trying to create a more complex dynamic within the Magius and between other characters and the Magius, maybe actually having Yachio be in the wrong and having maybe the Magius turning out to be the good guys, creating this sort of massive mid-story twist would have been worth the risk, trying to make something more along that line happen? Or is it just okay that they are rather one-dimensional, big obvious villains? Tell me that in the comments below, but for now, I'm Rosiel. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, and I'll see you guys next time. Also, if you wonder about Mifryu and Aina and the sort of blame that they have to carry or not have to carry, there are gonna be extra lore times just on either of these two, so yeah, I look forward to that.